name is Sandra Hernandez, and I'm going to be talking to you tonight about bottled water. How many times have you heard that you should drink 8 cups of water a day? How are we supposed to do that when we're on the go, constantly running around? We're college students taking care of business. It's usually more convenient. Well, you will think about going around the corner to the vending machine because drinking water isn't always convenient. But when we do go to the vending machine, sometimes if we really are thinking about hydrating, we'll choose a bottle of water. Will we use a drinking fountain? Not really, right? The bottle of water is much more convenient. We've been taught that it's healthy, safe, and the most convenient option. At one point in time, bottled water was even seen as a status symbol. Where do these ideas come from? The truth, and my main claim tonight, is that the consumption of bottled water significantly threatens consumers and the environment. I will argue this by describing how bottled water has turned water into a privatized commodity. Then I will discuss how bottled water can actually be harmful instead of providing safe hydration. Lastly, I'll talk about how the production of bottled water is also damaging to the environment. But starting with bottled water turns water into a privatized product. The fact is, clean, safe drinking water is a right. It should not be sold to the highest bidder. In 2007, Food and Water Watch indicated that a quick calculation between the average cost of a gallon of tap water and a gallon of bottled water is as follows. Bottled water ranges from about 89 cents to $8 per gallon, but tap water costs 0.002 cents per gallon. That means bottled water is thousands of times more expensive than tap water. Manufacturers treat tap water as a product to be marketed. Check the labels. If it says bottled at the source, if it says bottled from a municipal or community water source, that means it's tap water. Consider some popular brands. Aquafina and Dasani are actually owned by Pepsi and Coca-Cola. This was noted in 2007 by CNN, who notes that Pepsi-Cola announced its Aquafina brand bottled water is actually tap water. And Coca-Cola's Dasani brand bottled water also comes from a public water supply. Are these companies truly invested in consumers' health? The fact is, consumer rights often do not factor in to how companies will make profit, which leads me to my second main point, that instead of providing safe hydration, bottled water can actually be harmful. In 2013, Annie Leonard created a project called The Story of Stuff, and specifically in the story of bottled water, she illustrated how municipal water in the US is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency, which requires water testing by certified laboratories, and public water systems must provide reports to its customers about their water, noting its source, evidence of contaminants, and any compliance with regulations. However, bottled water counts as food. It counts as a product, so it is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. We should say it's not really regulated because it's a food product, the FDA cannot require certified lab testing. It monitors the labeling, but the bottling companies themselves are actually responsible for testing the contents of the product. That means the water. The FDA doesn't even require bottled water companies to disclose where the water came from, how it was treated, or what contaminants it may contain. That's not to mention the bottles themselves that can also harm consumers. In 2008, the Natural Resources Defense Council cites some studies that show chemicals called phthalates, which are known to disrupt testosterone and other hormones, can leach into bottled water over time. And these chemicals are present in the PET that goes into making these plastic water bottles. Another study found, according to the NRDC, another study found that water stored for 10 weeks in plastic and glass bottles contained phthalates, which suggests that the chemicals could be coming from the plastic cap or the liner. And bottled water doesn't just harm the human body. This leads me to my third point, that the production of bottled water is very, it also degrades the environment, and it wastes valuable resources. In 2010, National Geographic's Green Guide cited that transporting the bottles and keeping them cold burns fossil fuels, and groundwater pumping by bottled water companies draws heavily on underground aquifers and harms watersheds. And some estimates indicate that it takes up to 3 liters of water to produce 1 liter of water. Especially in light of California's drought, how counterintuitive is that? And the bottles themselves further contribute to environmental degradation. Most bottles end up in landfills and not recycled. This is confirmed by a 2013 statistic from the Container Recycling Institute that notes almost 8 out of 10 plastic water bottles from the US end up in a landfill or an incinerator. Hundreds of millions end up as litter on roads, beaches, streams, or other waterways. So consider these points the next time you need to hydrate. Bottled water is actually a product, capitalizing on the traditionally public good of water. And it's not even safe all the time. And it's not safe for the environment either. So consuming bottled water, please be aware, is doing your body and the environment a major disservice. By the way, this is not mine.
All right, the proposition's identified, but it's got 2 parts to it, so that's a little problematic. You need a more general covering term. The 2 parts ought to be some of the secondary claims, which they turn out to be, but there's also an additional argument that's presented there as well. You did have a pretty good structure identification. There's no numerical signpost, but you had pretty clear transitions to the points, so I thought that that worked pretty well. The whole idea on the first point, though, it feels mostly like it's background issue, because I don't know what the consequence of this is. I can't see what the harm is. The notion that consumer rights are somehow harmed because consumers are willing to pay through the nose for water in a bottle, I don't understand why that's a problem. That's, they don't want water in a bottle, get it out of the fountain. I think you point out the notion that it's substantially cheaper, and so people are acting counterintuitively to their own best interest. If there's a reason to believe that they've been manipulated in some way, I think you need to make a stronger argument on that. On the second point, I thought it was labeled very clearly. The problem was that you mentioned that it's not well regulated. I can believe that, although you've got this dilemma in 2 places in your argument. It's the same dilemma, because you mentioned that a lot of the bottled water comes right from local sources, basically the same sources that the municipalities use. So here's where that kind of hurts you in a couple ways. First of all, that means that it is regulated by the EPA prior to going into the bottle. And on the second point, that means that it's going to be free of contaminants prior to that. The only contaminant issue that you really have that you can prove is what comes from maybe the plastic bottle itself. And that's on the other point there. And that you need to develop a little bit better information on, that the seepage exists in levels that is dangerous to people, that these chemicals have some particular harm. Anything along those lines would be really helpful. All right, I've got to stop here because we do need